So this was mine. So I took a different approach from Miss Day. I couldn't really think of a theme right away. That's actually kind of the same as her. So I actually went to, okay, let me try to think of some important time periods in my life. So I was thinking about okay, well, obviously the first 5 years that I was alive is pretty important. Okay. I thought about my mid to late teens, high school, college, and then I thought about the past few years, and I decided to zoom in on one particular time period and see if I could come up with a theme from there. So whereas Miss Day went with her whole life, mine was I needed to focus myself a little bit more, so I focused on high school into early college. So then I did what we always do with theme. Actually, I tried to just brainstorm topics first. Big key ideas, key topics from that time period, and then generate a theme from it and then be able to choose. So I was thinking okay, when I was in high school, early college, independence was a big thing, academics was a big thing, feelings, everyone has feelings. That was a big thing for me, and so I tried to come up with themes for each of those, but the one that I felt good about and the one that I really wanted to go with was this. So it might feel like it's the end of the world, but it's not. It's actually a piece of advice that my mom used to give me, and I was always like, Mom, that's terrible advice, you're not making me feel any better, but then I realized that it was totally true. So I went with that particular theme for that time period in my life. Ooh, I don't want to edit. So that was phase 1. So phase 2 is once I figured out my theme, I figured out the time period, I just started reflecting and writing down some key times when my mom said this to me, and then I realized that it was actually true. So I kind of did a little brainstorm, and I thought about okay, it feels like the end of the world, but it's not. And then it came from my mom, and then I started thinking about different moments where that was true for me in my life. So I was thinking about when my dog died, I was thinking about when my friend moved away to college, when I moved away to college, and I started coming up with some times where that message, that theme, was really true for me. So that was my next phase. And then phase 3. So once I kind of figured out my 4 details, Doa, I realized that I needed to actually get them into order because when I was just writing them down, it wasn't. So I put them in order from earliest to latest, and then the same way that Miss Day and I were talking about, I knew that if I showed this to you, you'd be like, who are these people? What are you talking about? So I added little explanations underneath to give some context and to prove the second half of my theme, that it wasn't the end of the world, right? My theme was, it feels like the end of the world, but it's not. So I had also kind of 2 parts like Miss Day. So I added these little bits underneath the evidence. I talked about how it didn't turn out to be the apocalypse, even though my feelings told me it was, for each of them. So I kind of brainstormed and added a little bit more, and I put them in order. That got separated. So that's coming up with some explanations. And then lastly, this is my final product, right? So if I printed this out, this is what I would have passed in. So this is my theme. Got all my evidence typed up. I decided to just do a list. Miss Day was feeling the timeline vibe. I was feeling the numbered list, the bulleted list vibe. Either way is totally fine. It's exactly the same thing. I've got my events, my little explanations that I added, and I've got them in order. And that's it. So it took me a lot of thinking to get there, but it's probably a page, which sounds crazy because you're I spent so much time thinking about that and all it was a page. But what I have, if I zoom back out, is that's it. Here's my theme, here's my evidence and my explanations. That's my final product. So let's talk about questions, and then I want to give you a chance to start thinking, start trying.